the comeback is happening here in San Diego, and we're seeing our presence grow month after month. And now we're back to pre-pandemic levels. But I think just being smart enough to realize that you don't have to fight the same fight as everybody else. Do what works for your brand.
You are listening. You are listening to the Capital Craft Podcast, brought to you by the San Diego Brewers Guild. I am your host, Eric Fowler, Executive Director.
And my name is Jeff Fox, and I work with Beer Media Co. as well as Star Fox Media.
I am Jake Nunes, Director of Hospitality for Modern Times Beer and Coffee, and the President of the San Diego Brewers Guild.
Whoop, whoop.
Man, how do you follow that? Cesar Torres. I am now the proud owner and the founder of my own sales and marketing consultancy called the Torres Helona Group.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we're pretty stoked. And, when we were talking about sitting down together, the one thing that popped into our mind was selling beer, right? Something you've done a ton of for a long time.
Yeah, 11 years now.
Yeah.
That's crazy. It's older than my daughter.
That's ancient history in industries like this one, right?
I should be taking out in the pasture like Old Yeller at this point. Like I've surpassed my time for sure, but I'm making it work.
I think there's a San Diego beer industry class of like 2010, right? There's a group of us that all came in about the same time when things were really blowing up and have stuck it through.
It's funny, I just recently brought on Jay Jones to help me with sales, and like you talk about a veteran. I mean, that guy helped open up the Chevys here and run their beer program, Liars Club, Toronado. So yeah, there's definitely like different classes, and I fall into a wonderful one, I think.
So things have obviously changed a lot in those 10 years, right? You've been chasing your tail probably in every aspect of the phrase in that entire time. Like, what are some of the big differences you've seen since when you came in and you were assuming you were probably still vying for shelf space for tap handles, and now you're probably still doing the same, but from a much different perspective?
Right. I think, initially it was such a different market for the beer industry. It was more of the beer nerd, the beer craze. Everybody wanted what was new, what was exciting, and, coming in, not really having an understanding. It took me a while to get adjusted. I was cutting my teeth going to Churchill's and Urge, and luckily hanging out with friends that wouldn't let me drink the same beer twice. And I think kind of as I learned that I wanted to get into sales, because I started bartending events, and then eventually said, like, I know I can do this. But at that point it was, trying to find your niche and trying to find your space was more of a, get in where you fit in type of thing. There was so many cool things happening, and everybody wanted to put on the Alpines and the Russian rivers. And so I think from early on, where it was such a buyer's market, everybody had to adapt to the cool beer list. Everybody had to buy what Hamilton's was buying and what Small Bar was buying. And I think now it's more of a seller's market. I feel like an establishment has the ability now to pick and choose what they want, and they don't have to go chasing after these whales anymore. And it's more of a, hey, look, we're going to put on good beer, and people are going to come in here and they're going to drink it. So I think now it's more based off of relationships. As long as I have a relationship with said buyer or, said owner, it goes a long way into helping me retain that tap handle and making sure that as long as I'm giving them a good product, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, the way that I explain the way that access to craft beer and beer specific beer bars, and a lot that have closed down, the ones that we used to love, Small Bar, Toronado, Hamilton's. And what caused some of those changes is, I think a lot of people from the outside look and say the demand has changed so much. And I kind of disagree. I think the demand for those flavors have changed, but maybe the emphasis on independent or craft or local has changed, because you can go into Applebee's, you can go into Chili's and get pretty damn good tasting beers. It might not be made in San Diego. It might not be made by an independent brewery. Right. Maybe it is, but the flavor is very reminiscent of what some of those early Alpine beer, not that I'm comparing Chili's beer to Alpine, but
well, I mean, funny enough, you could probably find Alpine Nelson in the Chili's now, and it's just not Alpine Nelson anymore. No, you're not wrong. I mean, it's crazy what the beer industry has done to kind of, adapt itself to that. Because now there is so much access no matter where you go, and you can find things. Look at the way Petco Park found a way to cater itself to the San Diego beer fan. It wasn't just enough to have your macro beers in there. It's no, if we really want to succeed and set ourselves apart, we have to put in the local hotspots, the things that people want to drink.
I mean, I think it was also very interesting that one advantage that the craft breweries had going into this is that the bigger brands, the bigger labels couldn't afford the risk, right? To put out something like a really hoppy IPA without having any established market trends or things like that they're they can show the shareholders this will work, And so these little breweries come out and make these awesome tasting beers that people love, put a bunch of work into it, and then pave the way, and then the big guys come in and Applebee's makes their own IPA and with a $1 billion behind it.
Attention brewing professionals, are you looking to elevate your presence in the heart of San Diego's craft beer industry? Consider joining the San Diego Brewers Guild as a professional or affiliate member today. Access exclusive benefits designed to propel your craft to new heights, gain entry to premier industry events and educational resources, and forge vital connections within our brewing community. Visit sdbeer.com to explore the full list of advantages that a membership offers. Join the Capital Craft Podcast and the San Diego Brewers Guild, celebrating craft beer in San Diego since 1997.
That $1 billion thing, I think that changed everything. It really did, because it created an explosion of people that thought oh, wow, this is a place to come and get rich. And I think all of us from the outside were this is ridiculous and it's never going to happen again. But, for better or worse, it put craft beer on the map, and it made it a viable, it was, I think already, was it at one point the number 2 or number 3 reason for tourists coming to San Diego was their craft beer scene, right? But I think that in particular kind of elevated what San Diego and what beer meant as a whole together, that synergy that was happening at the time. So
and I still think it's there. I just think it's been so established that it's a given. It's a value add to coming to San Diego.
Absolutely.
Right. If I were to go to the Pacific Northwest and I'm filling out my tourist survey, I might not put craft beer, but I know that that's a big reason. And then the tertiary culture that comes with that, the good food, the farm to table connection with a lot of entertainment, I think we see, and I think San Diego should still build on. So what can a brewery do today, though, knowing that exclusivity isn't as much of a upsell as it used to be?
I think nowadays you see a brewery realizing that they have to do everything right. It's not enough to just have a good product. It's having a good presence with who you hire, the people that are at your tap rooms and represent your brand, and just as important, your social media and your presence and your outreach and how you stay relevant. And I think people having to adapt to that. You've seen some people do it remarkably well, and you see some people that have kind of fallen off by the wayside, and it's mostly because they don't want to invest in every component. They feel all right, if I'm doing this right, that's enough. And it's just not nowadays. It's not,
In your experience, that used to be a way of differentiating.
Sure. If you could just make good suds, you would make good suds. People were going to go out of their way to get it. But now there's so much of it around, because I think the competition has driven people to make sure that they realize they can't just put out inferior beer. And if you do, hopefully you can survive on your tasting room sales alone. But if you want to grow your brand and grow your presence, you have to do everything right. And, that's an investment that takes a lot. And I don't know that everyone's willing to make that investment, or some people just don't have the wherewithal and the bandwidth to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. So what's a reasonable, for a brewery that's fairly new, a couple years old, starting to test the market a little bit outside of their tap rooms? Maybe they have 1 or 2 tap rooms. What is your suggestion on approach of what kind of footprint they should develop? Should they be looking to, the days of we're going to distribute to 10 different states I don't see as much as I did 5-10 years ago. How inward should they be looking? If I'm in Vista, should I only sell in Vista? Should I be looking at getting accounts downtown to where I'm having to drive back and forth? Should I be looking at LA? What's your experience and suggestion for a brewery starting out?
I've always, I was lucky. I had a really wonderful mentor coming into this industry. Barry Braden, who used to own a local Habit down in Hillcrest, and now is owner and proprietor of Fieldwork Brewing up in Berkeley. And he would always tell me, own your backyard. Start there. The people that are going to be your most loyal customers, the people that are going to be your most rabid and, almost your cult following are the people that are within a surrounding 5 to 10 miles. Take care of those people first, take care of those accounts, and those will always be the ones that will drive your business the most. And then after that, you kind of have to have a clear definition of what you want your business to be. I would always urge people, stay self-distributed as long as you can. I think that's what set Virgin apart so wonderfully is like people knew they were always going to get fresh beer coming out of that tap room, and it was going to be controlled by them. You control your own message, you control your own delivery, and they did a wonderful job there. Dylan is a genius at the way he kind of built up the sales structure. So yeah, I think owning your backyard is really, really critical. And then after that, it's more of seeing, you can kind of tell what neighborhoods and what areas are more approachable and more willing to kind of give your brand a shot. If you pay attention to the metrics of, again, your social media presence of where your fans are, but, own your backyard, I think is the biggest lesson anybody can take out of what they're doing early on before they really want to try to explode. And also be cognizant of the fact that if you do want to expand, is that a possibility? Can you expand from 2,000 to 4,000 barrels and still manage it? Great. If you're trying to go from 2,000 to 10,000, do you have that system in place set up? Do you have the trucks? Do you have the cooperage? Do you have the ability to do that? And I think just being realistic about it and not just trying to explode without having a game plan behind it.
You mentioned staying self-distributed as long as possible. What would you recommend to a brewery that has either little or no sales team established yet, to kind of start that process and have some success there?
I mean, there's different ways to approach it. I think most importantly is just, again, knowing your brand, owning your backyard, and knowing that as you're building to that, you're catering to the people that, again, are going to be your biggest supporters. And I'm well aware that can change. You could have wonderful accounts that are doing 3-4 kegs a week, and then 6 months later, they're no longer around. But I think building a sales team is really critical in that those are the people that are going out and doing the work for you. They are almost like your taproom people, but just out in the market. Mm-hmm. So building people that are loyal to your brand, that not only are there just to sell beer, but are also representation of what your brand means. Like they have a following that's going to take care of, that's going to take care of also supporting you wherever that bar or wherever that beer lands, be it a bar or restaurant.
So you're saying invest in people is what you keep coming back to.
Having great people is a big deal. I think the breweries that do it well, I think a good brewery is separated from a great brewery mostly by the product, but I think the great breweries, I can have their beer at their tap room, out of a cold storage in a grocery store, at a bar or restaurant, and that product's going to taste the same, but also a great brewery is someone that I want to follow them because they have good people working for them that, they make my experience every time I walk in enjoyable, or when I'm approached by one of their employees or one of their brand ambassadors that I know, that's someone that I want to go out of my way for.
Mm-hmm. So Jake, what's your experience on trying to create a guest experience that mimics your brand, right? Modern Times has, if not the top couple, maybe the most defined brand in San Diego County. Maybe Stone would be one to argue, maybe has that too, but Modern Times is, we all have a vision of what Modern Times is in our head. How do you deal with staff in creating a guest experience and choosing the right people to ensure that that's consistent throughout multiple tap rooms?
The experience is so important for just like brand loyalty and like, even when people leave your tap room, if they leave with a good feeling from that experience and they see your beer out and about, they're going to grab it off of the shelf. As far as the staff goes, like recently we hired a bunch of tap room employees, and we prioritize like excitement and passion over beer experience, because we can teach them the beer stuff, but we can't teach them how to be an awesome person. Mm. So when you come in to visit our tap room and you engage with somebody that has
be awesome person, check.
Yeah. That's on the checklist.
Every morning I wake up. Yeah,
that's
I
something
didn't
you
feel
can't
very
teach.
awesome this morning, but
when you come in and have an experience with somebody that you enjoy being around, then that's what's going to keep you coming back as a customer. And like the beer stuff is important, and we teach a lot of that, but just being a good host in the tap room is paramount.
Yeah.
There is something to be said about feeling welcome when you walk in, and like just being treated to the point that you want to come back, because there's so many options. You can walk around any neighborhood and hit something that will serve you a good beer, but there's something to be said about knowing that you want to go back to a place over and over.
And with how important tap rooms were to like, kind of building your brand and building that, like, what people see your band as, how did COVID affect that with like the closing down of the tap rooms and not being able to actually, bring people into your place quite as often?
I mean, it was crazy because you had to package beer to stay alive, that to-go model, that delivery model. I know that was a huge thing. While I was still at Virgin, was implementing that, home delivery system and getting beer out. I mean, Dylan and I were delivering from Fallbrook all the way down to literally the border. Like one delivery I made, I was looking and there was like the fence and Mexico's on the other side. And I'm like, all right, this is wild. Like, but people, that's, you had an extra income coming in. And so I think everyone knew that they had to adapt to that. There was companies that were either taken out of business, or it was kind of the driving force between eventually going out of business was they didn't have the ability to package beer like that. And honestly, that changed the market in so many regards, because there was also liquor stores that you would walk in and there was one craft beer shelf. The next thing you know, they have a beer cave or 4 front-facing shelves that were all craft beer, because they knew that was how their business model was going to survive, was adapting to, the new craft beer wave of having to buy beer to take home, because you couldn't just, go out and hang out at a bar. And even the bars that were able to stay open, it was, the to-go beer model by serving growlers or, I mean, come on, people were putting beer into soup cups and giving you the ability to walk out of
Yeah, because I mean, you couldn't order a lot of it for a while.
Yeah.
But packaging beer sucks, and I don't think we talk about that enough, right? When you start releasing a beer out of your 4 walls, the odds that it goes to shit is so much higher. And there's so much bad beer I've had out there that might not be that bad the first month or 2 once it's being poured out of the tap room, but once it's been sitting in a can, depending on the quality of your canner and packaging equipment and how it's being stored and how it's sitting on a shelf. I mean, it's drink fresh beer does mean something.
Now is a harder time than ever for breweries to navigate the rapidly changing market, but Beer Media Co. is here to help. As a proud partner of the San Diego Brewers Guild, we are a full-service digital marketing and content creation company that works with San Diego breweries to reach new customers and create amazing engagement for their websites and social media accounts. If you are a small brewery owner trying to figure out the whole social media thing, or a larger brewery looking to up their engagement, send us a message at info@beermedia.co, because we know SD Beer.
Yeah, I think having the right people in place that know how your canning line is run and operated, and the intricacies of making sure that, you're studying up on, I remember watching Anthony pull cans off the line and teach me how he's, measuring his DO levels and making sure that it's a viable canning run that, you feel comfortable, or sometimes you would stop the whole process and readjust and start again because you want a good product and a sustainable product, like you said, because it doesn't really do you good if you send something out and it's only going to taste good for 3 weeks, like, and, you hear about shelf life, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. Man, I've had beer sit in my fridge for 3 months and, I'm not proud of that. Sorry. My ancestors are probably upset, but it happens. And, but a good packaged beer will stay tasting well for a while if it's done right.
And it's style specific, right? Hazy's becoming the most popular style, made sustaining the interest in craft beer very difficult because it was really hard to keep good for a long period of time. Yeah. What have you seen in terms of, you mentioned earlier that variety and innovation of styles and the next new beer and always trying something new, that the tickers, right, was such a big part of craft beer culture for a long time. And the last couple of years, that's not quite the case. I mean, some people are still out there doing it, but most of the time you look at a tap list, it's probably something you've had. How do accounts react to that? Do they care? Do they still want something new like they did 5-10 years ago? Or are they looking for you to bring a catalog of diverse styles that they can fill whatever they need on their handle, whether it's an American light lager, craft style, or American IPA?
It's funny. I mean, every account's different, but for the most part, people still want something that's new and exciting. The one-offs, the beers that they know they can only get because there's only 12 kegs in distribution, So there's something to be said about the fact that as long as you're creating something new and exciting, a fun label, that also attracts, your off-premise accounts, I think that's huge, but they just want consistency, more than anything. They just want to know that they're bringing in a good product. And, but it's almost taking a reverse back to like where the industry started, where everyone's carrying West Coast and lagers. And I personally am here for it. Give me all the lagers, give me all the West Coast. But yeah, I think, the hazies are here to stay. People kept calling it a trend. And I'm like, man, this is way too powerful to just be a trend. Like it's here, and it's not my personal preference, but it's not about what I like. It's about what the consumers are going to drink. So I think you're still going to see accounts flood their lineups with like the everyday styles, the West Coast, the lagers. But heavies are going to heavy consistency with the hazies is just something that's not going to go away. And there's still accounts that save one or two lines for the sour beers and your stouts because they want to offer that variety. I think that's huge.
And now that we're somewhat into 2024, what should breweries be looking at throughout the rest of the year when it comes to standing out in the San Diego market?
Man, standing out. I don't know how you stand out anymore. I mean, again, staying excitable, staying, present in the market and making sure that you're offering people new beers. And as crazy as it is to say it, the guys that do it best are the guys that go out there and do a crazy amount of collabs. They keep themselves engaged in the market. They keep themselves with fresh and innovative styles. And even if it's only going to be 12 to 16 kegs, they know they can make a double IPA, a double hazy IPA, a pastry stout. It doesn't have to be a part of their core lineup, but it's enough to stay excitable and stay relevant in people's minds. It's like once you disappear for good sometimes, and you're seeing that right now with, unfortunately when breweries are shutting down, people are saying like, oh my God, that was my favorite brewery. How are they gone? It's like, well, when's the last time you visited them? It's like there's something to be said about staying alive in people's minds and staying relevant. That goes a long way.
Yeah, being present, being accountable, and working for your space.
Yeah,
I just not assuming, and it's hard. Like life is hard. I'm sorry.
And then you have to take those risks. And sometimes, when you're on your dreaming, your prayer, it's worth it for you to say like, oh no, this is worth the risk. Like if I invested so much of myself into this, whether it's time and effort and obviously a ridiculous amount of money, you have to make those risks because that is your dream and you can afford to do that. Well, you might not be able to afford to do that, but you have to because that's what. Afford it. Yeah, I mean that's why you got into this business, And I think again, for better or worse, that change in trend during that big $1 billion buyout was that people saw this as a viable business option, where before it was a passion, it was a labor of love, and I think there's a delicate balance between that now.
We want to thank you for coming on, but before we sign off, what are your couple key takeaways that a brewery should be considering or monitoring or looking at selling beer in this changing market?
Again, I think it's doing everything right. I can't emphasize that enough. It's making sure that A, you're making a great product, B, you're having the right people represent it, and C, just making sure that, you're finding ways to stay relevant out there, stay fresh in people's minds and, try to control your destiny as much as you can. And I know for a lot of people, that ship has sailed. And if you're going to get into distribution, then, be mindful about your distribution. And one thing I love about what Grant's doing at Mason is when, he saw some of his sales start to fall off here in San Diego, he's like, well, that's not the only way to make a living if I'm distributing beer. So now he's distributing to 30 different states. And, the comeback is happening here in San Diego, and we're seeing our presence grow month after month, and now we're back to pre-pandemic levels. But I think just being smart enough to realize that you don't have to fight the same fight as everybody else. Do what works for your brand.
So where can everybody find you and keep in touch?
I prefer you didn't, to be honest. No, I'm just kidding. Please, when you see me at the corner of the bar at the Elwood, leave me alone.
Yeah, no, so good.
It's so fun. People tell me like, you always post about places you're not, and I'm like, there's a reason for that. My job is to go out and engage with people, and when I'm done engaging, I just want to. No. Follow me at Cesar Torres Consulting. That's kind of going to give you an update and refresh on what my new adventure is. It's cool. I feel like for me, I just realized that I had the skill set and the network to make something work for myself. And as things are changing and breweries can't afford to pay a sales rep $75,000 to $90,000 a year to pay him a living salary, you're seeing it right now, man. I mean, in the past month, 6 weeks, there's big prominent breweries that have cut 8 to 12 sales roles, so I feel like I kind of wanted to get ahead of that curve and develop a business model that would show people like you can buy into this service without having to overcommit and, just be realistic about your emphasis on returns, and we'll find a way to make it work.
That's fantastic. Well, if you want to watch more of this, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and you can follow us at the SD Brewers. What's the Instagram handle right now?
SD Brewers.
SD Brewers. I was going to say SD Beer, and I was like, no, that's our hashtag. SD Brewers on Instagram, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks, Jake.